We wanted to make such a good first impression.
What do you mean, we?
Welcome to the Filmcast review of Inside Out 2. I'm going to read the plot summary from the internet. Quote, joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust have been running a successful operation by all accounts. However, when anxiety shows up, they aren't sure how to feel, end quote. Now, Inside Out 1, I think, is a movie we all really appreciated. And I will say I was a little skeptical when they announced the sequel to Inside Out 1, because Inside Out 1, I thought, was pretty solid overall, told a complete story. It didn't feel like it was asking for a continuation of what was going on with Riley.
I don't know about that. It sets up for a sequel directly. I mean, it literally like ends with almost like a cliffhanger.
Yeah, that's fair.
What is that button? Puberty. That's new. That feels like kind of a.
I thought there was a kind of fun little button, no pun intended, on the end of that movie, as opposed to like, hey, we're actually teasing for a sequel. But that's fair enough. That's fair enough. All that said, Devindra Hardwar, I'm really curious. What did you think of this movie, Inside Out 2?
I think it's perfectly fine. At times, very good, but I think it kind of falls short of the greatness of the first Inside Out, and it also made me just wonder, like, how. I know Pixar has done such a good job of like showing us different versions of the world or how things are represented. I almost wonder, like, do they coexist with each other? Does the emotional aspect of every character also exist for the people in Toy Story or for the kids from Monsters Inc? Like, how does this make sense? Like, we're watching Pixar kind of deconstruct our lives, right? And I'm like, when does it end, guys? Like, and how does it all work together? So those were the feelings I had watching this movie. But also, it's like, you're attempting to make a movie.
Devindra has the anthropomorphized version of cynicism in his brain.
I mean, I think it's a legitimate question.
All the way. It's
on me all the way.
So,
but if your business is making these deconstructions, these personifications of our world, it's also like, I don't know how they all interact. I don't know if the rules of one world will apply to the other. I started thinking these things because my mind started to wander while I was watching this movie, because I think it's perfectly fine. It is a perfectly fine follow-up to Inside Out, but this is a sequel where Riley is dealing with the early aspects of puberty. But because this is a Pixar movie, that's a more difficult thing. That's a more difficult thing than you can fit into a PG-rated Pixar movie, right? You can bring up anxiety, you can bring up ennui. Puberty involves a lot of more things, that they just a lie. Like, we're not going to talk about that in this movie. But you think about it, they can never talk about it. They can never actually talk about the full complexity of a human being in this franchise that is trying to anthropomorphize every single emotion we have. It has to end because it has to become like a Touchstone movie or something. It has to become a totally different Disney studio, right? To go on for Inside Out 3 or whatever.
That would be amazing. I had the same thought. Like, if they literally made the next one an R-rated.
Or PG-13. It can be PG-13.
Even PG-13.
Clearly, they need to pass the torch on to Illumination Entertainment. And
clearly.
Get the minions action in the mix. But
minion puberty. Oh, that'll be something.
There is that meme of, like, 1995. What if toys had feelings? 1998. What if bugs had feelings?
Yeah.
2006. What if cars had feelings? 2015. What if feelings had feelings? And I feel like
there has to be a stopping point.
Devindra is Charlie Sheen from Wall Street. He's asking Michael Douglas, how much is enough? If feelings has feelings, how much is enough, Pixar? How much further can we take this? Because I think we've reached the logical terminus of this situation.
Well, at least for this particular franchise within Pixar, they can't go any further. They can't do anything else. And I do think a movie like Turning Red actually did a better job of maybe kind of exploring some of the messier aspects of what puberty means and how you relate to your parents and whatnot.
Yeah.
It is weird how sterile this movie feels, because the actual conflict of it is so small. It's not about Riley really acting out against her parents. It's about this one thing. It's about her friends and this one hockey camp and the conclusion of that. And I feel like I don't know. I feel like they had the potential to do a lot more with a story like this, and this just feels like we got to slim this thing down to a 90-minute movie. Pixar needs a hit, baby. We need a direct sequel. We need all our friends back. We need to make this as easy to consume as possible. And I felt a little cynical about the actual approach to this thing. I think justified. I do think like if you're pretending to dance with emotions, people are more complex, and this movie can't touch that at all.
Wow, I thought I was going to be the only one that was a little bit, slightly more middling on this film. But let's hear, Jeff Kanata, what you thought about Inside Out 2.
Well, Dave, I guess you could say what I thought about Inside Out 2 is best summed up in the form of a limerick.
All right, let's hear it.
Much more than a toy or a car, this concept's the best of Pixar. As much as we try to be free of anxiety, this metaphor is who we are.
All right.
I could not disagree more with what Devindra said. And it makes me sad to hear him say it, because I think one of the virtues of this movie is that it is taking a very, I think from the outside looking in, small moment of a child's life, of a developing preteen's life, and looking at how big of a deal it is for the child. And what this movie is about is our sense of self, who we are to ourselves, which I think is the wonderful next logical progression from where the first Inside Out was. A movie I am a huge fan of. It's my favorite Pixar movie, one of my favorite animated movies. And I think this is as perfect a sequel for me as I could have hoped for what I think is a stellar movie. And the reason for that is because this is a very specific time in the development of a kid. We have not gotten to sexuality yet. And I think that's the thing. It's hinted at in this movie. I could talk about in spoilers. I think pretty obviously hinted at in this movie. But I agree with you, Devindra, that in the context of a family-friendly Pixar film, they can't go to. But what they find is this in-between stage, which is really important in the development of a human being, where we're trying to figure out who we are and how we relate to the world. And what's so great is that the metaphor that is established in the first movie, I think really applies. And it's a little bit more sophisticated, but there's stuff I need to wait for spoilers to say, because there's a portion of this movie I specifically want to reference, but I won't say it until spoilers. But the idea that we get a more sophisticated, more complex internal life as we mature, I think is really cool, is really interesting. And that metaphor, I mean, I brought my 7-year-old, soon to be 8-year-old, with me to see Inside Out 2. When I saw Inside Out 1, I had no children, right? The interim between the first movie and the second movie is my child's entire life. And sitting next to him, watching him watch this movie, and then walking out and being able to have a conversation with him, a child who has, the same, if not more, challenges as any other kid would have with regard to dealing with emotions. And I'm walking out of this movie theater saying, hey, that the angry guy, sometimes he's at the controls in your brain, right? Like what can we do? And the fact that this franchise is really not about denying any one part of your internal life, but sort of reconciling all of it and realizing that a multifaceted, complex, robust, emotional existence is actually good, and that there are ups and downs in life. And this movie is about that moment where you realize who am I to myself? What is worthwhile? And I think every kid in this point of life is challenged in a way, I think, that is very well articulated in this movie. The external forces, you sort of grow beyond your familial existence. You are starting to get influences that are external to your family. And the the sort of standards that you have set for family life are bombarded by peer pressure and external desires that are now starting to grow and form. And I think it's so beautiful that this is represented on what is a small stakes from any adult's perspective, but for this kid, it's everything. It's who I am. It's who I'm associating myself with, the kind of person that I want to be. And I, as a young person, I was very much a nerd, when that term had very negative connotations. And I didn't have friends. I didn't know who I was. I desperately wanted them. This movie resonated for me as an adult looking back on that life. It resonated for me looking through my child's eyes, watching him experience it as he has not yet gotten to that place. And he's maybe learning about what that's going to be like. I thought the metaphors were beautiful. It made me weep. I thought it was great new characters. They have gone, by the way, full Muppet with these emotions, which I think is very interesting, because the first movie's creature designs of the anthropomorphized emotions were not that. Now we are full Muppet town, and I'm loving that just from a design perspective. The ideation of an internal life, I continue to find delightful and funny and fun. There's so many wonderful things we'll talk about in spoilers of just puns and gags that made me laugh and have a great time, and how we use these things that we all know. I mean, this movie is using therapy language and kind of bringing young viewers into a holistic view of their own internal life using the language and learnings of therapy. And I love that for it. Like, the fact that this is mainstream entertainment, that this is a massive hit, and it kind of is there as almost an instructive device as well, alongside the goofy, fun, silly, wacky slapstick comedy that's also present. I know I'm in the minority here that I loved this movie, but I really loved this movie.
I also want to say I did not hate this movie, Jeff. So I thought it was a perfectly fine movie, and I agree with pretty much everything you're saying. I thought it could be more, because I think it self-limits itself a little bit here.
It is a perfectly cromulent film, is how I would describe it. It is charming, it's entertaining, it's funny. I cried a little bit. Probably the first Pixar movie I cried in since, I don't know, I can't remember. Coco, maybe? The first Inside Out. So I had a good time at the movie theater. At the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that this movie is basically the first movie. It's the theme is extremely similar to the first movie, which is about embracing complexity and how all these things contribute to the wholeness of an individual person. And it kind of makes the point in a different way, and with new and interesting characters. I really like Anxiety as a character. Maya Hawke plays Anxiety, right? And I thought she did a wonderful job voicing that character. Really compelling character. But yeah, I mean, it's like, I enjoyed that, and it's basically, I got the same thing out of it as I got out of the first movie. So that's kind of my thoughts. No, again, like Devindra, didn't hate it.
It adds some new elements. I like the exploration of the self. Like, I think, and we'll talk about this in spoilers, I think some things Joy says by the end are really insightful, and really fascinating. But I don't know, I feel like there's so much more you could be doing with this thing. It certainly does hit at a very specific point in a child. I like the design work as well. I think Anxiety is a horrific looking character, but that's actually exactly what Anxiety should be. It should be like, I don't like looking at you.
She would be so upset to hear you say that.
Yeah, she should be.
But anyway,
but also as somebody who's like, I feel like I've been dealing with anxiety long before puberty. Like that was a companion for me for a long while. I think that totally fits like how that emotion should feel. So the way that's represented and the sort of destructive ways that kind of shows up, because the themes of this movie is also like other stuff kids are dealing with too, like perfectionism and the pressures they put on themselves, maybe not that society puts on them, but what they do to themselves. These are all important things to explore. I wanted a little more. It felt a little too pat to me.
All right, Let's do some spoilers for Inside Out 2 starting right now. Jeff, during the review, you alluded to some of the more clever aspects of how it visualizes Riley's mind. I agree. This is kind of one of the fun elements of these movies is like, how do these Pixar writers imagine this child's mind to be? And, right from people, like when puberty happens, people coming in and kind of re-architecting the entire console and changing everything,
overnight.
Overnight. That was funny. And
the sarcasm.
I knew you would love that. I was like, I had a Jeff tingle.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant on a pun level, which
Yes.
I was tickled immediately.
Yes.
But then the functionality of it, where as you try to speak across the sarcasm, it turns into sarcasm.
Right.
Just genius. The stream of thought, the brainstorm. Like there's a bunch of really, I thought, delight. It's like they sat around a table and was like, give me more things that can happen inside your head.
Yeah. Give me the puns. Give me the puns.
The moment though that I'd like to pluck out and really talk about that I think elevated this movie to one that stayed with me and has stayed with me since I've seen it. One I've returned to. As I was driving home in the car with my son in the back seat, in the car seat, talking to him about what his favorite moments were, what he was thinking about.
And it sounds like he liked the movie based on what you
describing.
Right?
He did. He very much did. And he laughed a lot. There's some wonderful slapstick stuff, particularly with the mind police. Wonderful callback in that moment too, by the way, when the hat hits the ground and it says "my hat" on the lapel, on the not lapel, the
the inside.
Yeah. Anyway, really wonderful callback to the first movie. But the line that Joy says, in the beginning of the third act, or sort of in the end of the second act, is, and she realizes that she's not going to be able to do anything to help. And she says, I guess as we get older, we just feel less joy.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
That was like a thunderbolt. And it really made me think about our own internal lives. There's a really subtle thing that this movie did in the first movie did, where Joy is at the controls for the daughter. She's the sort of the head of the brain trust in Riley in the first movie. But anytime the very brief moments you jump into the mom's head, who's in charge? It's not Joy. It's Sadness. They don't make a big deal about it. It's just who's the one that's speaking for the group is the Sadness lady. And when you go into the dad's head, I think it's anger. I'm not really sure, but anyway,
not that dad. I don't know.
Well, I think it's whatever the case. It's not joy.
Not
It's
joy.
not joy.
It's not joy. Yeah.
And it really made me think that forgive me for going here, but this notion of, even as I was watching this movie through the eyes of my offspring, it really made me feel like the entire process of having children is sort of being able to get back in touch with the simplicity of the purity of that emotional life.
Yeah.
The internality, and I just think it's wonderful that the first movie, it's like these basic emotions. This id, this super ego, this ego, this, like, the kid is pure id. It's pure, like, I want what I want. I'm sad, or I'm mad, or I'm happy, or whatever it is. And as you get older, those things get more sophisticated, and there's more of them jumbling for control in your head, and those other things recede. And yes, we do feel less joy. And part of what this movie is reminding me, as it is this entertainment for children, is the beauty of the lack of sophistication, the beauty of that simplicity in a young child, and being able to just have this pure joy, just have joy take control of your brain for a moment, and how rare that is in adult life. And it really moved me. It really moved me, that insight in that one little moment of that movie. And it kind of contextualized the whole thing as Riley is trying to, as the islands of her personality are crumbling and she's reconstituting who she is. And as we all do, as we get older, it was very powerful and very profound. And it's one of the most, I found one of those things that art can do to speak truth to your soul in a moment. And I give the movie a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, that's the truest line from the film. That definitely struck me too. Like a lot of things I feel like I wasn't really clicking with, but that specifically, it makes sense. And it's also like the first movie. I think I haven't rewatched the first movie, but Joy was kind of like the problem there of just like trying to force joy in situations where, she didn't necessarily was actually helping. I want to shout out a piece by former guest BJ Colangelo, who wrote a great thing over at Slash Film about how much Inside Out and Inside Out 2 wrecked her. I think like that's worth watching because she brings up a lot of these points as well.
But yeah, I think both the first two, I'm so thank you for sharing that, Jeff, and I'm glad you're moved by that. I think the thing that strikes me about the first two Inside Out movies, and I'm guessing there will be more, is
there can't be more. Like we need to have this discussion because there can't be more.
I kind of feel like
under
Finch was
Pixar
right on that one, but
is the first two movies are kind of about like toxic positivity, right? Like this idea of hey, let's be happy all the time. Like why that is actually like a bad force, right?
Maybe
why
don't bury your deepest, like your worst experiences. Don't bury them.
Yeah, I love that. That was the thing I really appreciated was, oh, hey, let's take all these bad memories and put them way in the back of someone's mind, right? And it's like, well, those are going to come up again later somehow, probably in this movie, and they do, and that's one thing I appreciate is actually kind of the inverse or whatever opposite of what Jeff is saying is like, yes, I agree, that's a great insight about you experience less joy, but also like that there is something about wanting to experience joy all the time that can be equally bad, right? As that force. And that's something I think the movie makes very clear in both movies is like, hey, there needs to be room for these other things because they all make us who we are, right?
Yeah. It's extraordinary to me too, how that metaphor is reinforced through the just pure A to B to C plot points. Like, for example, the way that Joy solves the problem in this movie is that she literally blows up those bad memories and rides a wave of bad feelings back to the front of the mind. Like, and you can imagine that to me is such a evocative metaphor, this thing that I know that I have experienced internally of just this welling of all those things that I've tried to push down coming back up in this undeniable flood of negative emotions that kind of reorient you in some way. And like just that kind of pure Pixar action-y sequence of, hey, wouldn't it be cool if there's a big wave of balls and they're riding?
It means something. Yeah.
It has another layer to it. And I think, I've had some arguments with friends that didn't care for these movies and thought the metaphors were there just as a cheap gag. And I really reject that notion. I think that they work on, sure, there's some things that are, a joke. And I think that's fine in a movie like this. But I also think the structure of the metaphor as a device really holds up. And anytime we pop out and see how Riley is handling something, it is all informed by who's at the wheel and what's happening right now. And I think it's really well thought out and well executed.
It's very smart in that way. And by the end, by the way, like Riley is just having a full-on panic attack.
Yeah.
It is like, it's because anxiety is like out of control, like taking over everything, but also like the bad feelings are coming in too, but maybe she needed those bad feelings to kind of come to terms with who she is. And that is, I think this is probably like the best representation of a full-on panic attack in a children's movie, at least.
Yeah.
Because
when
it's a real thing. Yeah.
Anxiety is basically moving as fast as the Flash at the
Yeah,
end of the
yeah.
movie. Like
Yeah.
anxiety is like in all locations at once, essentially. That was
that
like
feels very true. That feels
Yeah,
very
right.
true to life. And the end of this movie is that anxiety is not bad. The anxiety is trying to protect you, but you also need to know how to deal with it. And one thing they kind of say is, what can you control? Which is another therapy speak thing. Like, what can you take control of at this point? I think it was like towards the end of the movie where they're talking about like, okay, we're worried about like what's next for Riley prepping for her test or something, right? She could do that instead of worrying about the thing she can't control at all. So it is very smart about how it's thinking about emotional intelligence. Yeah.
I did have a moment of walking out of the movie theater, and literally my son turns to me. We literally open the glass door as we're walking out of the entire building to the parking lot, and he turns to me and he goes, "Dad, what is puberty?"
Not yet, son. Not yet.
Yeah.
I was gonna say this is kind of like some mature themes
Mhm.
for an 8-year-old to watch this. Did you have like a conversation about that afterwards, or?
I mean, I skirted the issue pretty hard. I mean, I was like, it is. I said it's going to be a time in your life when you are going to have much more complicated emotions happening inside you, and your body's going to be doing new things. And
You
I
should just
kinda
point
talked
to the
about-
poster of this movie, Jeff. Like, this
Yeah.
is what's going to happen
Take
to
a
you,
good
son.
look. You're going to
Soon.
hate me, son. But yeah, I mean, I think it works on. We had a lot of talk on the way home, and it
Mhm.
works on what was your favorite part? Oh, I like the part where the video game character rolled up into a ball and it didn't do anything. And
Yeah.
it has enough there for kids who are going to get it. But I do think some of that other stuff is seeping in, and I'm
Mhm.
able to talk to him in the subsequent days when he's had moments of getting upset. I ask him who's at the controls in his head. And, I don't know if that's going to
Mhm.
persevere, if we're going to continue to have that kind of discussion, but it's wonderful to be able to have language like that, a big entertaining thing that he was excited to see delivered to him.
Let me tell you the most upsetting part of this movie. It wasn't when Riley had the panic attack. It wasn't when
Mhm.
one of her friends ended up getting hurt on the ice, and
By
you're
her.
wondering like how serious that is. It wasn't when Riley turned her back on her friends.
Oh man,
It
brutal.
was when Pouchy got mouth violated in a very upsetting fashion.
Oh, it's so funny.
Hashtag
Yeah.
justice for Pouchy.
Justice
I mean,
for Pouchy.
I think, basically anger. Lewis Black just rooting through Pouchy's mouth like it's a freaking
Yeah.
pocket
pouch?
in his backpack. You know,
Pouch? Yeah. That's
Not
a great
cool.
Dora the Explorer shout out with their like
So
I'm sure
good.
parents watching this is like, oh my god, we're doing Dora now. We're
So
doing the whole
good.
Pouchy thing. That character is named Bluefy,
Yeah.
right? It's not Bluey.
Ron
It's
Funches, by the
Ron
way, with
Funches.
great voice work.
That feels like a Disney dig on Bluey almost, but yeah, Bluefy. Also the who is it? The video game guy. Just like hilarious. Really cool.
I loved how they got like the pixelation correct on that
Yeah.
video
Perfect.
game character.
PlayStation
The
1
PlayStation
pixelation.
1.
Yeah.
We all recognized it as PlayStation 1. We all knew
Yeah.
instantly it was PlayStation 1.
So
Very
But yes,
smart.
Yeah.
yeah, that
and
whole
then
sequence was hilarious.
It's really
Yeah.
fun. Not a fan of the deep dark secret that they are now like teasing for the next movie. Like, she's
We
a
all-
child.
We all know what that is,
Has
though,
she killed
right?
a man? What's her deep dark
No.
secret?
She's gay. I think it's a coded language to say
It could
she's
it could
gay.
be that. It absolutely could be that, but it's also like, yeah, I don't. If
I mean,
that
that's
is
what I
it,
got out of it.
I
but-
mean, the movie is also presenting like there's more like her being more fascinated by the girls around her than worrying about dudes or anything. But also like that would feel like a cop out if that's the deep dark secret. But yeah,
it said not yet when he's like, I could
Yes.
come out, and they said not yet.
not yet.
And I
Even though
think that
puberty
her
is happening.
infatuation
Mhm.
with that, particularly that one girl, it
Mhm.
didn't. It played to me like a kid who doesn't understand sexuality yet,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
feels these feelings that are much stronger than I want to
Sure.
be your friend.
But also like I know kids envy, like really envy and like idolize the older kids all the time too. So it's like that could go either way. But again, this can't be a Pixar movie.
But
If
I
they ever
thought-
follow
Well,
up with
yeah,
it,
why-
I thought
yeah,
that
why
was
do
a-
you why do you think you both think there's not going to be another Inside Out movie? So what is the logic
not
there?
under Pixar is the thing. Like I don't, or at least has Pixar done like a PG-13 rated movie? I don't think so. think they've
I
done
think the
PG,
problem,
right?
Dave,
Yeah.
is that if we go to the next logical step of Riley's
Yes.
existence, her maturity, it gets to a place that is dealing with stuff that is hard to deliver to the audience that has been watching these movies. It is a thing that I think parents would have a harder time bringing their young kids to see because it is bringing up conversations that parents don't want to have quite yet.
Absolutely that, but also like directly dealing with sexuality and desire and the human emotions that this movie conveniently does not even touch. And I think I love Turning Red, and I think Turning Red did a good job of like exploring some of those more like the more like passionate, volatile side of puberty too. Like these two movies kind of work really well together. I just don't like, given the metaphors they have set up, where do you go from here? Riley is a teenager. What are you going to do there? Pixar? It's untouchable. You can't be a Pixar movie is what I'm saying.
All right, well, we'll see. But I don't know. When movies make $300 million in their opening weekend, generally more of them get made.
Well, yeah, Dave, but I'm asking you. This is like how would you pitch that movie? How would you be in the writer's room and be like, okay, Riley is now a couple of years older. Now we have to deal with direct sexuality.
I think the thing that I'm most disturbed by is how this movie retcons all of the adults in the in the movie, right? Like in the first Inside Out, we only saw the 5 emotions, and then it's like, oh, she has anxiety and envy and all this on me, and it's like, where were all those people in the adult head? And it's like anxiety like comes out from the back of a curtain. It's like, oh, they're just all hiding back there. Then I guess. Come on, guys.
Damn it, Pixar. Also retconning the voices of fear and disgust. Bill Hader and Mindy Kaling. I miss them as much as I like Tony Hale. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a little bit disappointing. It's like
that was a contract dispute. They wanted to be paid more.
Yeah,
as much as Amy Poehler, and that Pixar did not want to.
By the way, Amy Poehler, the perfect casting for Joy.
I also think the animation, so like the character Joy does like all this stuff, all this emoting, all this dancing, and I just think it's a wonderful creation from an animating perspective. So
I feel like they're taking a lot from like Tinkerbell with her, like of like Disney characters. She has the same like look and movement and everything. I mean, there's a lot to like about this movie, but my daughter is currently 5 years old, and I do not know when like we would approach this movie. Maybe 8 or 9. I feel like that would probably be a good thing. But at the same time, I'm more counting down the days I can watch Princess Mononoke with her or something. So she has other interests than the Pixar stuff.
All right. Well, why don't we wrap it up there? At the end of the day, it is really impressive that director Kelsey Mann, who directed Inside Out 2, made a movie. Thank you so much for watching this video of the Filmcast. Check out these other videos that we have available, and be sure to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get other videos from us in the future.
You can also go to thefilmcast.com to catch all of our audio podcast versions of all of our episodes.
And support this podcast at patreon.com/filmpodcast, where you can sign up for ad-free episodes and exclusive After Darks.
Thanks so much to everyone who makes the Filmcast possible.